Alright, so we're going to go through kind of a full example of data prep, data visualization, and modeling using the Titanic data set from, it was found on Kaggle. Somebody had it up there. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to take um, different characteristics about the passengers, like what their age was, what gender they were, what passenger class they were, if they're like first, second, or third class. And we're going to use that to predict whether or not the person survived. And so this is going to be more of a classification um, modeling exercise rather than if you think of more like a predicting where you're trying to predict how much money somebody spent or like how much the house is worth, things like that. So it's going to be kind of a yes or no, did they survive or not. So this is kind of a classification thing. Yeah. So we'll just bring in the data set, and first we're going to look at some visualizations. These will be kind of stuff that you learned from last time Michael and Jeremy taught. We'll view the data just so we can kind of see what it looks like. We've got our passenger ID, whether or not they survived. This is the column that we're going to be predicting. Their class, their age, gender, things like that. So that's kind of what the data will look like. And then we can see some of the more numeric summary statistics of these different variables. So we'll take a look at some of these visualizations to show. So we can see that there were more males on the ship than there were females. Um, in this one, we can see that there's a lot more third class passengers than there were of the first and second class. Um, we've got a box plot here of the fares that passengers paid when they came aboard the Titanic, and we've got some nice outliers to be aware of. People who paid really high prices if we use that as a predictor in our model. Um, Here we have, based on each class, how many were male and how many were female. We could even change this around a little bit, and we could see who survived in each class. Let's start with the class. We'll just change this here real quick so we can see that more of the first and second class passengers survived than the third class. I guess if people have more money, then they're more, I don't know.
Important.
Yeah,
Which
important.
is true, of course. But that's what the data said happened. They got more of their first class passengers saved.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
so we can even do this by male and female, so we can see like this is what Dr. Dean is talking about. There's a lot more males who didn't survive than there were a lot of more females did survive. So it was true that they tried to save uh, the women and children. So the first of these visualizations is kind of help see these relationships between the different variables and the variable we're trying to predict, so that we can know which variables will be helpful in our models as we're trying to predict. Because if we were doing something like the ticket number of the passenger, trying to use that to predict whether they survived or not, it's not that helpful because it's pretty much unique to each passenger. So these visualizations kind of help us see which variables are more important or better predictors. So that's kind of why we're going through that. Here is a distribution, a histogram of the ages of the passengers, and we can see most are kind of younger, middle-aged people. Um, these plots are kind of interesting. This is a difference between how old they were and how likely they were to survive. And so we can see there's a different linear model for the males and the females. And so the older a male is, the less likely they are to survive, and the older a female is, the more likely they are to survive. So that's just another thing that will help us. Yeah, so the survived column in the data set is either a 1 or a 0, like 1 if they survived and 0. So that's why they're all on either the 1 or the 0. And the different color dots are We've got more females up here that did survive, like we saw in that earlier graph, and a few more males that didn't survive. So, and then these linear models are based off of males and females. So, and then here's a graph of what fare that the passenger paid and how likely they were to survive. And like we saw earlier, the more money you have, the more important you are, I guess. So the higher the fare, the more likely the people are to survive.
I think that's true. I don't know who said it up here, but I think if you had the higher fare, you were higher on the ship. Who said that? I think that's right. And they were able to, that they weren't down below where they couldn't get up. Part of the problem is getting up out and below the ship up to deck. Does that make sense?
Didn't they lock some of the people down so securely?
Yeah, and that's a problem, right? That they think the ship's going to sink, and they'll try to seal things, and so it was worse. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it wasn't just money; it was where they were on the ship.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if maybe you can go over just what the differences in the inputs are again. Like I know we're using them a lot, and I want to make sure that I can understand
Have to
when
scroll
to
to the
use
top.
which import. Just because it, yeah.
So NumPy is basically being able to do math with arrays, that library. Pandas is being able to work with data frames, so being able to, NumPy is more kind of like single variable array type work. Pandas is being able to have like a table, basically like a data frame with multiple columns. That helps you be able to manipulate that and do a lot of calculations with that.
Is this what you were wanting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And then matplotlib is the basic plot showing. You can be able to create the different plots and graphs. And then Seaborn is kind of like an addition on top of matplotlib, where you can do fancier graphs and things like that. And I think that plot in the homework that took forever, that was from Seaborn. So I don't know. And then the warnings. On some of the graphs, it shows some extra messages and warnings, so you can just say we want to ignore those for right now, so we don't have them kind of distracting from what we're trying to see. So.
Why don't you talk me through this too, since we're here? Let's just talk through the data a little bit, real quick.
Yeah.
So you've got the passenger ID, which is just the unique identifier. Survived, yes or no? Well, he said one has survived. Passenger class, was it 3 that was the more pricey one?
No, I
It was
think
the other
it
way,
was yes. First
like
class
first,
is
second, and third
yeah,
class.
yeah.
Then the name, you'll notice these names have, some have information. They have a Mr. and a Mrs. and a Miss. So there's information in the name in terms of signaling whether it was a child or an adult, and whether it was a man, Mr. And so you'll see when Nathan gets there, he's going to go pull that out, and he's going to do some feature engineering where he'll pull it out, because there's a difference between a male that's a child and a male that is a man, right? We already know that children survive more. So being able to be, and that the women were preferentially survived. So when he'll pull that out, so we can use that explicitly in the model, where it's kind of buried inside that name string. And then sex is obvious, age. You'll see the NAN, see the NAN down there. Not all of the age was filled in, so he'll do some mathematical estimating for those that are not filled in. We have sibling and spouses that were with you, and then we have parent and children that were with you. Add those two together, and that's going to be your family size. He'll do that too as he preps the data. He'll add both dimensions of family size together to get a family size. Let's see, then we've got a ticket number, which is essentially not helpful for the modeling, as he said. It's just the thing that was printed on your ticket, but it doesn't have meaning in terms of predicting survival or not. It's just a number on a ticket. He'll dump that because he's figured out that isn't very helpful. Fare is helpful because it's also sort of related to first class, second class, third class. The higher fare survived more, as we talked about. They were higher up on the ship, so that's going to help him. And then cabin, most of that stuff is not filled in. Most of that stuff is just not there. And then embark, there were 3 places that you could get on the Titanic from. You know, as the ship sails around, people get on at different places, and so that's what the data is that we have to work with.
Mhm. And I guess technically, if what we learned about how some of the people were higher up on the ship cabin could be helpful in that case if it was like showing where they were on the ship, but because there's so many missing, it's not going to be too helpful right now. So that's the data.